WBOK 1230 AM, the People's Station. WBOK, New Orleans.
Peace, family. Welcome. This is your brother Willie Muhammad, and welcome again to another broadcast of Class is in Session. We're coming to you today live from the studio of WBOK 1230 AM, where there's real talk for real time. So we thank you all for tuning in every week. And as I said before, my show has been moved from Mondays at 3 p.m. to now Saturdays at 2 p.m. So nonetheless, we still hope that you are finding these shows to be informative, thought-provoking, and we encourage you to research what you hear from what I may present when I'm in a studio here by myself, or even what you may hear my guests talk about. So we're going to get right down to it because time flies by very fast, especially when you're dealing with very good topics and you have very good guest. Today we have with us, he's calling in, and he's my brother. I know him as Brother WBOK Muhammad. You on, Brother Arif?
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I am, Brother Mr. Willie.
And once again, brother, I know I've shared it, but I really, really thank you for making yourself available to be on this show to talk about this very, very important issue. Now, I know about you, but many of our listening audience don't. Can you briefly share with them some of your background about yourself?
Well, yes, sir. Thank you. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to share what we can that your listeners may gain a better understanding of our beloved teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. First of all, I've been honored to be a follower and a helper of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan ever since we first met in 1979. And I'm honored to say that I'm still striving to be a better helper to him today. I currently serve as General Counsel for the Nation of Islam, for which I've held this post since 1991, and I'm also blessed to be serving as a member of our National Executive Council, as well as a member of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's research team. That's a little bit about my background.
Yes, sir. We appreciate that. Now, you said how you've been serving in this position of the General Counsel for the Nation of Islam since 1991, which makes it, that's 27 years. So I would imagine that this has afforded you the opportunity to spend a considerable amount of time in the presence of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan outside of the public eye, and more than the average believer or member of the Nation of Islam. And I often tell people how the minister is the same principle way that he conducts himself in the public. He also conducts himself that way also in the private, regardless with whom or what. And in light of this controversy that he has been responding to, not that he definitely did not initiate it as it relates to members of the Jewish community in their effort to paint him as being anti-Semitic. In your private settings with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, have you ever seen or heard him make any type of anti-Semitic remarks or encourage people to do anything that would negatively affect the well-being of any member of the Jewish community?
Well, now, my dear brother, Student Minister Willie, that is certainly a large can of issues to address. Let me first say that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, as a servant of Almighty God and a man that we believe is walking in the prophetic footsteps of Jesus that we read in the Bible, is one of the truly good men that I've had the chance to meet. And when I say good men, I mean he lives what the scriptures speak to. And as a servant of God, no servant of God would ever mock any person. So in short, the answer is absolutely not, because that is not the character or the makeup of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan at all.
Definitely. Thank you. And that's definitely, and I can bear witness to that. And we have heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, or I've heard him, and I think you can bear witness as well, when this effort is made to paint him as a hate teacher or the Nation of Islam as a hate group, where one of the challenges that he makes to those who make such false charges is that to show where any member of the Nation of Islam has went out and committed any type of violent crime against a member of the Jewish community or has defamed a synagogue. So you being the General Counsel, you know, have you ever, and I know this may sound like a redundant question, but I want just to put this on record, have you ever had to defend the Nation of Islam from in the legal sphere against such charges?
Well, again, my dear brother student minister, in the Nation of Islam, in the history that we have, there has never been any acts that the government can point to that would say that we are violent. We're exactly the opposite. We are peaceful people, and we are never the aggressor in word or in deed, not just specifically to any person who may be Jewish, but any person, whatever their creed or class or color may be. The doctrine and teachings of the Nation of Islam has nothing whatsoever to do with being violent or with being vile or being disrespectful as it relates to any faith community or any particular ethnic community. And I hope, Brother Minister Willard, we'll have an opportunity to really talk about this history regarding this anti-Semitism, because the truth of the lie against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam as being anti-Semitic has to be told. And I'd like to really take a few moments to be able to explore and give the true history of how this false charge came about. Yes,
sir, and I'm glad that that's the direction you want to take, because that's the next question that I was planning on asking you. Can you talk about, that history and how this has come about?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. In 1983, the Reverend Jesse Jackson was running for the presidency of the United States. He asked the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam if we would support his candidacy. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan met with his laborers in Chicago, and the board agreed to support Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson, at the time, was advocating a position of justice for the Palestinians and meeting with Yasser Arafat, who was the president of the PLO. As a result of this, the Jewish community became very, very hostile to him, particularly the Jewish Defense League and other Jewish groups, calling really for Reverend Jackson's death. And there were very real death threats against him. And as a result, the Fruit of Islam secured him before the Secret Service actually entered the process of giving Reverend Jackson security. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan warned the Jewish community to, instead of attacking Reverend Jackson, but to sit down and to talk with him and to dialogue. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan also warned them that throughout our history, we have been the victims of having our leadership to be killed because those who did not like positions that we took. And he warned the Jewish community that if they were to harm Reverend Jackson, that he would be the last black man that they would harm. And as a result of him defending Reverend Jackson, then Mr. Nathan Perlmutter, at the time in charge of the Anti-Defamation League, and Nat Hentoff, called the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan a black Hitler. This is very important. Much of the news media keeps quoting saying Minister Farrakhan called Hitler a great man. Well, the truth of the matter is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was attacked for his support of Reverend Jackson, and to cast a aspersion against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, they picked a man that we know the Jewish community has for decades now held up as the personification of a Satan. And so they called the minister a black Hitler. And he responded to them saying, Hitler was great, but Hitler was not great for me as a black person. He raised Germany up from the ashes. And on this point, I want to say this. The word great means something of consequence. It does not mean it's good. You can be great, but you could be wicked. So we live in America. She is great, but she is wicked. So when he referred to Hitler, he referred to him as great, but he said, don't compare me to your wicked killers. And he also said he was not proud of what Hitler did to the Jews. All of this is on record. But he was attacked and called a black Hitler, and he defended such charge. And then it was out of his statements that they falsely said he called Hitler great without giving the true context of what he said concerning Hitler, that great meant consequential. Now, we know today you can go on any Discovery Channel, any channel of history, and you can see the documentaries. You can see the histories of Hitler. They play this over and over and over again. He's very great in the minds of Jewish persons based upon the history. So the word great does not mean good. It means a person of consequence, and that's proven today by America and Jewish persons continuing to show and telling the history of Hitler. And so it is this false charge of anti-Semitism that has been laid, which is used as a weapon. And it's a weapon to punish. It's a weapon to threaten others to stay away from this individual, to deny us the right to free speech, to deny us the right to make a living, to deny us a right to make progress in this society, because it's like the worst kind of scarlet letter you could put on someone to be charged an anti-Semite. But I would say to you that we may not have time today, but a Semite really is referring to the ancient people of the East, and believe it or not, the original Semite is the black people and the people of that area. Those who call themselves Semite, many of them that we know associated with the Jewish community are Ashkenazi. They're from Europe. They're not the original Semite. So we're not anti-Semitic. A Semite is a part of the origin of us and our history. But we're not anti-Semitic. But because they control the media, and they do, they control entertainment, and they do, they control the legal profession, and they do, they control the medical industry, and they do, they control business, and they do, they have the power to define and then to threaten any who would stand up for truth and tell the truth of their power, their inordinate power. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is making Satan known and pointing out to us who that Satan is, that we can make the intelligent decision to separate from that kind of evil and wickedness.
Now, you mentioned something when you talked about how the label of being an anti-Semite has been used or weaponized as a way to hush legitimate criticism or critique or examination. Do you have any other historical examples that you could share with our audience to show how this has been done throughout time?
Well, of course, my brother, there have been too many to enumerate here, but let's just say there are many black leaders that were called anti-Semite as well as whites. President Jimmy Carter was called an anti-Semite. Nelson Mandela was called an anti-Semite. Paul Robeson was called an anti-Semite. Malcolm X was called an anti-Semite. Dr. King was called an anti-Semite. Do you get my point?
Yes, sir.
Anyone that would disagree with speaking to the truth and criticizing Jewish behavior. See, we have to know the difference. We should have the right to criticize behavior if it is wrong. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, as a man of God, is pointing out and criticizing errant behavior, wrong behavior, and criticizing wicked behavior, unjust behavior in the Jewish community. So when you criticize Jewish behavior, then they label you as anti-Semitic to blind people to the wickedness that they're doing, and hoping that you will get more caught into the idea that somehow Jewish persons are being assailed based upon their faith or their religion, which they are not, but the minister is criticizing the conduct of those satanic Jews. So it's not about a religion, ethnicity, or race. It is about wicked conduct.
And that your response brings to mind the other attempt that has been made by the media, where they attempt to say that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan made disparaging remarks about the faith of Judaism, right? When they talked about they alleged that he said, what was it to say, a gutter religion? Can you elaborate and clarify that for the listeners?
Yes. In this ongoing debate that occurred historically, we mentioned how the minister was falsely accused of being a black Hitler, and he responded. And out of that, then they falsely claimed that he called Hitler great, and they still tell this lie today. He never said that. We are clear, I hope today, what he said. Then, when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was talking about the state of Israel, in this same battle with these satanic Jews who were attacking Reverend Jackson, he said, now that state called Israel hasn't had any peace in 40 years, and she can never have any peace because there can be no peace structured on lying, thievery, murder, deceit, and using the name of God to shield your dirty religion under his holy and righteous name. Now, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has responded to this particular quote several times, where he was falsely accused of calling Judaism a gutter religion. First of all, he never used the word gutter, and he never used the word Judaism. He was speaking of the state of Israel, and he was referring to the dirty practice of America, Britain, and others who went over into Palestine, pushed the Palestinian people out of their land, and then transplanted Jewish persons into that area. So it is the dirty practice of Zionism that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was referring to, and the dirty practice of setting up a state unjustly in a territory where people lived and pushed them out, and today they don't have justice, and there still is no peace in that part of the land.
Wow. Now, I hope the listeners are really paying attention. Time is flying by fast, so we're coming up on our first break. And for those who are listening, this is Brother Willie Muhammad, class is in session. And we have with us today, he's calling in live, our brother WBOK Muhammad. And he's the Student General Counsel for the Nation of Islam. And we're here talking about this controversy and the false charges that continue to be attributed to, tried to be linked to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about these charges. And also, our brother, we hope that he will be able to share what he has witnessed and what he has seen as it relates to an effort that was initiated to help clean up our communities from crime. So stay tuned, brothers and sisters. If you have anybody else that you know will be interested in this show during this break, tell them to tune into the radio. They can also get it online at WBOK1230am.com. So this is your brother Willie Muhammad. Class is in session, WBOK 1230 AM, and we'll be back after this first break.
My mom has kind of an 80s thing, like a permanently stuck in the 80s thing. We're talking teased up feathered hair, acid wash denim jacket, and shoulder pads. So many shoulder pads. I've tried to bring her up to speed, but after a week or so, it's just right back to the leg warmers. But I just got a new phone from AT&T, and check this out. It came with a second one for free. It's the perfect replacement for my mom's phone, which I'm not sure she can text on, if she even knew how. So I figured, why fight it? She loves her 80s TV. This will totally help her stream all her favorite shows filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Buy one of our popular smartphones at regular price from AT&T and get a second one for free when you buy both on AT&T Next with eligible wireless service. AT&T. More for your thing. That's our thing. Limited time. Each requires up to $800 on agreement. Select devices. Requires one new line. Minimum $65 per month combined for service on both with auto pay and paperless bill. Free after credits over 30 months that start within 3 bills. Taxes, fees, credit, and restrictions apply. See store for details.
Ralph David Abernathy Sr. was a leader of the Civil Rights Movement, a minister, and a very close friend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He collaborated with King to create the Montgomery Improvement Association, which led to the Montgomery bus boycott. Abernathy co-founded and was an executive board member of the Southern Christian Leadership Council, also known as the SCLC. In 1968, Abernathy became the president of the SCLC and led the Poor People's Campaign in D.C., among many other marches and demonstrations for disenfranchised Americans. Abernathy served as an advisory committee member of the Congress on Racial Equality, also known as the CORE. During his lifetime, Abernathy was honored with more than 300 awards and citations, including 5 honorary doctorate degrees. This Black History Hero is brought to you by Back of Town Coffee Parlor and WBOK, reminding you that Black History is a year-long celebration.
If you have diabetes, you know it is a serious problem. But research shows that controlling diabetes makes a huge difference in maintaining a healthy, happy life. New Orleans East Hospital has a comprehensive, multidisciplinary diabetes education and prevention clinic that is now open. The Risa and Alden J. McDonald Jr. and Sue Ellen and Joseph C. Canizero Diabetes Center is an open-access diabetes center affiliated with the National Diabetes and Obesity Research Institute and the Cleveland Clinic's Endocrinology and Metabolism Institute. Patients receive support with monitoring blood glucose, eating a balanced diet, managing medications, setting goals for exercise, and dealing with life stressors. Personalized treatment plans also include referrals for other services and specialists when needed so that patients can keep their diabetes controlled. For more information or to schedule an appointment, visit our website at www.neworleanseasthospital.org or call 504-592-6600. New Orleans East Hospital, quality health care close to home.
This is Lester Love with today's Motivational Minute. Never bring a problem without a solution standing right next to it. If you see where there is a problem, before you take that problem to someone else who can solve the problem, try to see what you can do to bring some solutions on how to fulfill the need and fix the problem. Because when you bring a problem without a solution, it's just a complaint, and no one wants to hear a complaint. So whenever you have a problem, make sure to try to find out if there are any solutions. Bring a solution and not just the problem. And this is Lester Love of the City of Love. Tune in to Spreading Love every Sunday at 12 o'clock noon till 3 o'clock on WBOK 1230 AM. Real talk for real times.
At Liberty, it's never been easier to bank with us. Go to www.libertybank.net and apply for a checking account to gain immediate access to our wide range of services, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At our new Gentilly branch, use the ATM not only to withdraw, but also to deposit money into your account whenever convenient for you. Go to www.libertybank.net. Open an account now and enjoy the freedom of 24/7 banking with Liberty. There's freedom here. And don't forget to use promo code WBOK.
WBOK, real talk for real time.
Peace, family. This is your brother Willie Muhammad, and we're back again. This is Class is in Session. We're at WBOK 1230 AM, where it's real talk for real times. And for those who are listening and may want to call in to ask questions or even make a comment, the call-in number is 504-260-9265. Once again, that is 504-260-9265. And on air with us, we have our brother Abdul-Arif Muhammad. He's the General Counsel for the Nation of Islam, and he has been giving us the historical background regarding this attack on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And he has been clearing up many of the false charges that have been thrown at our brother. And we want to continue with this conversation because it is very, very important. So, Brother Arif, You know, I've heard the minister on several occasions talk about how he has been visited at his home by Jewish rabbis, Jewish scholars, members of the Orthodox Jewish community. And he talks about how what they say and how they realize that what is being said about him in the media is not true. Have you had the opportunity to witness any of those meetings or even talk to any of those members of the Jewish community? And if so, what was that like?
Well, yes, I would. I was blessed as a group of I would call very sincere Jewish persons who believed in the religion of Judaism, who had met with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. They were called the Neturo Kata, and in fact, you can find them online. They are a group of Jewish persons who believe in Judaism and the right of return, but they believe that Zionism, which is what they see the state of Israel as, being formed based upon a Zionist philosophy and not, which is a political philosophy, and not that they were basically led back to the promised land by the Messiah. And so these Jewish persons have met with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. They are staunchly against Israel and Zionism, which is the political philosophy that undergirded the taking of the land taking of the land of the Palestinians and was given to those Ashkenazi or European Jews. And so we did have an opportunity. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had us meet with a delegation of these persons, and they're very sincere. And they are a part of that Jewish group who believe in the Scripture, but they believe in it as they are waiting for the Messiah to lead them back to the Promised Land. And they are absolutely against Zionism and the current state of Israel, and they speak very strongly about the injustice of Israel against the Palestinian people.
That's interesting. And it is those who the media never gets any interviews from them and any quotes from them where they can talk about, their interaction with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. In my talks with you, you brought up something that I didn't know that you actually had the opportunity to. You played a very integral part in this incident that I'm about to bring up. It's talking about the security teams, not the security team, the security businesses that were set up in D.C. I remember it started there, where the brothers were going into these housing developments and helping to significantly reduce crime. So I want to read this portion of this article, and then we'll get into the questioning. For those who are listening, this comes from the Washington Post, and it's titled, "A Breach in God's Invincibility." And it begins like this, quote, "Police used to call Mayfair Mansions Little Beirut. People who lived in the ball rows of apartments in Far East Washington knew one law amid the lawlessness. Drug dealers ruled. Then one day in 1988, an unarmed Nation of Islam volunteer patrolling the complex karate kicked a shotgun out of a drug dealer's hands. Almost overnight, the dealers disappeared. Front stoops crowded with kids. Grandmothers ventured out for evening walks. Mayfair Mansions was suddenly considered safe. Then D.C. Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly, then U.S. Housing Secretary Jack Kemp, even then First Lady Barbara Bush praised the intimidating bow-tie volunteers. Where sermons, slogans, and programs and police had failed, the nation guards had not." And so we know that the contracts were eventually canceled due to the pressure put on various politicians by members of the Jewish community and through the pressure that came as a result of congressional hearings. So you had the opportunity to testify and serve as general counsel during that event. So nearly 23 years have passed. So what are your thoughts about this incident looking back at it 23 years ago?
Well, thank you. And before I address that specifically, let me just close out on the question of the Neteru Kata group, that these religious Jews who are not a part of the synagogue of Satan, but who really believe in the religion of Judaism as revealed by Moses through the Torah. And I want to make this point because I think it is crystal clear that the satanic Jew, the synagogue of Satan, they believe in their rabbinical book called the Talmud. And this book is filled and has been replete with anti-black and anti-Christian statements. And as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, Savior's Day, he showed an example of one of the statements where they talked about Jesus being boiled in excrement. But there's so much more than that. But these rabbinical Jews, some of them who are belonging to the synagogue of Satan, they follow the Talmud and not the Torah. But the Neturei Kata follow the Torah. And they also see the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in a much deeper divine perspective as a man who is emerging in their eyes from the Scripture. So we say praises be to Almighty God Allah. Now, on to the issue of what became affectionately known as the Dope Busters. I was in Washington, D.C. during that particular period in history, and very honored to say that I was a firsthand witness of what you just read. And my attitude about it today is clear that the Jewish community who hated the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and their hatred doesn't just extend to him, it extends to us. And it extends to any good coming to us, meaning black people, not just members of the Nation of Islam. And these powerful Jewish groups, several of them, at least three major Jewish groups, from the ADL to American Jewish Congress and other groups, petitioned Congress to bring us before Congress and threaten the head of HUD at the time, Henry Cisneros, under the false charge that we were using government contracts to propagate religion. Again, another great lie. We defended ourselves by the grace of Allah, myself, our brother Leonard Farrakhan Muhammad, and exposed the lie. But, of course, because of their pressure and because of their inordinate power politically, socially, and economically, many of the contractors who had given us contracts and knew of the good work that we were doing in bringing peace in the communities where we lived, which is our mission. It's not a question of money. It's our mission, and we still are on that same assignment today to bring peace to our community and to help to create an atmosphere where our people can live in peace. And so, again, why would you not want people to stop killing each other? Why would you not want our people to stop killing themselves with drugs? Why would you not want our people to not continue to be destroyed through these social vices of alcoholism and other kinds of self-destructive behavior? Why would you be against that? And why would you be against a group that loves their people, that would come into the community to try to save their people, unless you are, in fact, of Satan?
So you're saying that despite the results that were produced by these brothers going into these, what they said, to call a housing development Little Beirut, to go into this type of environment with no guns and to be able to successfully significantly reduce violence and crime, that they still use their influence to stop something that was beneficial for the black community.
That is correct. So to me, that does not show that you sincerely care about black people. It shows me that you are actually anti-black, that you're actually against us, because you can't be for us and see that we're trying to clean up our people and make them self-respecting and productive citizens in the society, and to take our people away from the immoral vices of the society that in many cases has been made a part of the learning process in our community. And then when we try to clean up our community and make them self-respecting, you intercede to interrupt that. You cannot say you're a friend of black people. You have to be seen not as a friend, but as an enemy to black people and being anti-black.
And these security firms, from what I've read, they existed in Chicago, parts of Los Angeles, Baltimore, and even in D.C. And now today, years later, we have this issue of violence where, the black community is often portrayed as not taking the initiative to address this violence. But what you have just shown is that we have, and when we have, those who are not affected by these issues have used their influence to stop something that was benefiting us. Now, and to me, like with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he talks about one of the issues that he has with the members of the Jewish community is their inordinate control and influence in our affairs. Can you talk more about their inordinate control and influence over black politicians, entertainers, and others?
Well, I think the pertinent thing, you can have an inordinate power, but the question is, do you use it for good or do you use it for evil? We could say Almighty God, Allah, has the most power. He is the most powerful of all. Is that right? But he has the ability to give benefit, or he has the benefit, or he can give punishment. He can do both. Is that right? But he really desires good for you. In the case when we talk about Jewish communities' inordinate power, we're talking about the use of the power in a wicked way. That's injustice, and that is the issue that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has with members of the Jewish community who are of the synagogue of Satan. I want to make it very clear. We're not referring to Jews who are trying to live the life that Moses brought. We're not talking about those Jews who are trying to live under the Torah. We're talking about that satanic Jew, that a part of the synagogue of Satan who seeks to oppress and to manipulate and to use people and to take advantage, gaining wealth and power while keeping people oppressed. That is the injustice that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan speaks against, and we stand with him in speaking against that.
And now, as we lead into this next question, on July 19, 2010, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the letter was published also in the final call, but there was a letter he wrote to black leaders, and there was a part of the letter where this is a part of the statement where he says, "I'm asking you to stand down." So he was talking to black leaders, and I know you're familiar with the letter. Can you explain to our listening audience what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, why did he write the letter, and what does he mean when he said to stand down?
Well, of course, throughout our history, as black people have a champion who stand up for the liberation of our people and who attempt to organize that would bring us freedom, justice, and equality, and to be equal with the best in civilized society, there's always been a group who would see that this activity of raising up a people in consciousness and raising them back up to civilization means they will be the loser in terms of economics and control. And so when that person is identified, the powerful forces then begin first to try to get people from that community to attack them. So it's always been a tactic over our 400-year history to have black people who are in the pocket because they work for the enemy or who are under the control of the enemy or desire nearness to the enemy. They are used to speak out against that person who is standing up for the freedom of his people and for the liberation of his people. You can call the roll of the great Paul Robeson, and you can call the roll of Booker T. Washington. You can call the roll of Marcus Garvey. You can call the roll of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You can call the roll of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and you will always find the same pattern. They will find someone that they have bought, they have purchased, and who are willing to speak out against their own self-interest against a man or a woman who is attempting to do what is righteous and who is attempting to help and aid his own people to make them self-respecting.
And so when the minister was asking blacks to stand down and saying not to get involved in this?
Well, there's an article that came out some years ago in the final call, and maybe we'll republish it when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had been invited to speak on one of the anniversaries of of the 1963 March on Washington. And he was invited by black leadership, and then because of Jewish pressure, they sent him a letter disinviting him. And we went up to that meeting and that event at the Lincoln Memorial and confronted the person who was the main protagonist. If I remember his name, he was Rabbi Saperstein at the time. And we confronted him on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial about his wicked deed in forcing our brothers and sisters to disinvite the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan from that meeting. And then we published a front-page story in the Final Call. The front cover said, "Let my people go." And there were pictures of all of these black leaders who fell under that pressure to disinvite the minister. Here is the point. This is against your self-interest to deny a man who is seeking the same thing you claim to be seeking, which is the betterment of our people. And he has the ear of the masses of the people, so he should be your brother and ally. And so when the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said stand down, he was saying simply this: get out of the way and let them come forward, meaning these enemies. Let these opposers come out from behind the shade. Like in The Wizard of Oz, he was behind the shade and veil until it was pulled that he might be exposed. So the scripture says, and on that day, the scripture, if you could help me, Minister
Williams. The man of perdition will be revealed. That's
it said, and that day shall not come, and that day shall not come, except there be a falling away first. And the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is saying, get out of the way, black people, and let those who are really against our self-interest, let them step out into the light, and we will show you that with the power of our God, we will defeat them.
Wow. And we see, unfortunately, there were, in this recent series of attacks, there were some black politicians, members of the CBC, I think Barbara Lee, Meeks, and I can't think of some of the other ones who have come out and who have bitten the bullet. They're falling for it. I did some research and found out how many of them actually receive money from affiliate organizations that are part of the Jewish lobby, the AIPAC, right? So what are your thoughts on those recent ones that have come out and condemned the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
Well, of course, our Executive Council of the Nation of Islam, which issued a letter that, of course, expressed our sense of disappointment at those members of Congress who would actually condemn the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan without any justifiable reason other than the pressure that would come from these groups. But this, again, is the whole point of the minister's letter, which said stand down. And he also warned in that letter to our brothers and sisters who would continue to do this that they were putting themselves in a dangerous position because the people are rising in the consciousness today. And so you would be exposed as one who is betraying the best interest of yourself and your own people if you stand against a man like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is standing for God, the truth, and his people.
And so for those who are listening, what are some specific actions that members of the black community could take to support the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan against these attacks? I'm talking about pastors, politicians, business owners, the everyday brother and sister that's just in the streets and just taking care of their family. What are some specific things that they can do to help?
Well, first of all, as you know, in the Holy Quran, it says to us, and we hurl truth against falsehood till it knocks out its brains. And so all of us who are witnesses of truth have to be courageous enough to speak the truth as we know it. Secondly, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has said to us, that we should organize our communities. In 2015, we had the Justice or Else March. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan talked to us about the 10,000 Fearless, which is for us to go into the communities and to help work with our brothers and sisters to help us to stem the violence so that we can try to organize our community, that we can help our people to be better. So there's real work that we have to do in terms of bringing knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to our community and helping us to rebuild the wasted cities wherein we live. And so this is the great work that's in front of us. And so since 10-10-15, justice or else is still the cry. So we have plenty of work to do in our communities to make them a safe and decent place in which we are to live.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that in your opening responses to some of the earlier questions, how the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has called for sit-downs with members of the Jewish community, right? And now he's actually calling for a full showdown. So, can you talk more about his calls for to have a sit-down initially and now for a showdown?
Well, again, we're already in the showdown. Mm. The fight is on. And so God's people will have to rise to defend a man of truth and to defend a man who has defended us, and he has defended every black person that has come under attack by our enemy, no matter what they have done. He has proven that he loves God, he loves his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he loves his people. And so he has stood for us and he has fought for us. So the showdown is on, and we just need to rise up and let him know that we back him, that we support him, that we're going to stand with him, and that we're going to fight hard with the truth. And it reminds me of Malcolm X's movie at the end, where at the end you saw the great Nelson Mandela in a school, and he was talking about, I am Malcolm X, and then each student would say, I am Malcolm X, I am Malcolm X, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm saying everywhere they look, let them hear, I am Farrakhan. Let them hear, I stand with Minister Farrakhan. Let them hear, Minister Farrakhan is a righteous man of God and we support him. Let us stand and say, you lie against a man of God. Let us, everywhere they look, see that we're standing with the man of truth in this hour, and that we're standing with the man of God in this time.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Malcolm X, and as I was reading your bio that you sent me, and I think this is important for our listeners to hear as well, how you were a part of that legal counsel representing the Nation of Islam in this lawsuit against the guy Murdoch, right, because of the slander toward the Nation of Islam and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So in these last, we got about 5 more minutes, can you share the history of that effort for our listeners?
Well, again, continuing the flood of wicked propaganda of the enemy, they could not bring anyone that could defeat the truth and the work of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, so the enemy attempted to resurrect our brother Malcolm X and then attempt to falsely charge the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan with being involved in Malcolm X's assassination, which they know full well that the minister was not in any way involved, because let's just think about it. If they actually believed that he was involved in the assassination of Malcolm X, there's no statute of limitations on murder. They would have arrested him by now. So that should let you know that it's a lie. But they spewed forth the wicked lie, hoping to make people think that he had something to do with a hero that was among us, that they now raise, trying to blunt the effect and to deter us from following a man like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So, yes, for that defamatory falsehood, that lie, myself and our lead counsel, our great student national spokesperson, Sister Minister Abel Muhammad, who was lead counsel, we filed the lawsuit against the New York Post and Mr. Rupert Murdoch to back them away from this lie. And it stopped the New York Post from running a series of articles that they were planning, attempting to create the lie and prove a lie, which they could never do, that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan himself had anything to do with the assassination of Malcolm X. And you may remember some years later, they then set up Malcolm X's daughter, Kubila, and entrapped her into a false sting operation with another Caucasian gentleman, and it was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan who came to her defense and rallied in New York City at the Apollo. It's on YouTube, to defend Dr. Betty Shabazz and to protect her family. This is the kind of man we have in the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and why we should hear him. This is why everywhere he tells us to go, we should go. Everywhere he tells us to stay from, we should stay from. We should hearken to the voice of God among us coming through the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
And so we're getting ready to wrap up. And, brother, I really thank you for your strong representation and your strong interview and for all that you have shared to help the listeners to be able to see through the lies and the smoke that has been put out there regarding the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So briefly, any closing words that you would like to share, if you have social media, how people may be able to follow you on social media?
Yes, I am certainly now on Twitter. I am on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Arif Muhammad 37. I'm on Facebook as Abdul Arif Muhammad. I'm not much of a social media manager, but I do have a great helper who helps me and has going to do more to help me. One of our great sisters who's also an attorney. Her name is Sister Hassani, and she's going to help me in the social media arena. And for those who are interested in more information, they can reach out to her at getjusticelaw@gmail.com. I want to make sure I get that right. That for those who are having any other inquiries, getjusticelaw@gmail.com.
Thank you for that. And so for those who are listening, we thank you, Brother Arif, for taking the time out to share what you shared. And for those who tuned in, we thank you all for tuning in. So this is another broadcast of your Brother Willie Muhammad. Class is in session. We hope that you all tune in again on next Saturday at the same time, same place, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Salute to Brother Aaron Neville behind the boards. And may God be with everyone who's listening. Thank you again, Brother Arif. Peace.
Peace.